have, as most of you know, Mike Fitzgerald, who not only thinks outside the box, but has taken up residency there. From Between the Lines. 2012 might be the last year, we don't know, the end of the Mayan calendar. Who knows what that might mean? It might mean just that they ran out of ink, or perhaps the writer got tired and she went off to make herself a cup of cocoa tea and never got back to finish it off. Who knows? Or it could be a big change in society. Wouldn't it be nice if all of a sudden everybody decided to be kind to each other, and we wanted to suddenly decided to share our resources with each other and save some for the future generations? Who knows? And that's the great thing about the future. You don't know what could happen. Anything could happen out there. But here this morning to discuss some of the things that might happen, or certainly some of the things that have been happening and what these things might lead to, are certainly the best brains in North Dublin. Yeah, very good, yes. Before I start, of course, I should introduce myself. I'm Heidi Bedell. I have been hosting this programme for on and off for a few years, and most of I think all of my panellists have also been hosts as well, with one exception. So, to start with, we have, as most of you know, Mike Fitzgerald, who not only thinks outside the box, but has taken up residency there and can send postcards. Helping him is our Dermot Brangan. We're lovely to see you, long-term activist in the community. And then to help them with the difficult questions, we have two females whom we know are much better at coming in with the sharp angles. Both have long pedigrees in community work. Enda Roche and Catherine McAvoy are very welcome this morning. Good morning. Good morning. And viewing it all with a cynical eye is a new trainee, Richard Butler, who has been... Hello, good morning. You've been sitting in a few sessions already, Richard, haven't you, to kind of observe and learn and...
Yeah, see how it all goes before I can take over the world.
Take over the world. Yes, and well, I hope you do a better job than the people who are in charge at the moment.
Thank you, Heidi.
No, of running the world, of course. Of running the world. Now we have a few topics. If anybody wants to make a comment on any of the topics coming up this morning, you can ring the station at 867 1190. You can text us on 087 6944 500. That's 087 6944 500. Or you can email us. Isn't it great, the Appliance of Science? btl@near.ie. btl@near.ie. So, if you can leave a message then for Ray, and he'll pass it on, and we'll read it out here, provided there's no nasty language or anything like that, or libel. We do check it for that. So don't send anything nasty. Now, with a few subjects that the presenters, not that our listeners do ever send any nasty things, really, we've got lovely listeners. We have three subjects that have been brought up by the panellists. The household charge, which is causing great excitement out there in the world of Ireland. We have a view of judgments made by in the justice system, and by one judge in particular. So we could look at two of his judgments and have a discussion, see what we think of the justice system. And a very horny one, really, the Krug Park Agreement. If we get time, it would be good to discuss that probably as well, because there's a lot of ramifications for that. And where
so arousing.
Arousing, very arousing.
I think they're going to have to revisit that, no matter how much they deny it.
Well, do you want to start with the household charge? Because from what I gather, there seems to be a lot of confusion, and it could be quite useful, I think, maybe to...
I think it'd be useful to discuss it, because I think a lot of people just don't know what to think is going on. In other words, who's hit, who's going to be hit, and who does it affect, who does it not affect. I think there should have been a press release beforehand with a lot more detail. And even the tax that they announced, then they announced later 25,000 of those wouldn't be affected. So, I think there's a PR job to be done, and it badly needs doing, because they're upsetting people that need to be upset.
But do you not think, Dermot, it's fairly straightforward? I mean, if you own your property, you pay £100. I mean, it seems to me to be perfectly straightforward.
Well,
if you don't own your property, then you don't pay it, because you're not the householder.
So
what's difficult about that?
The fact anyone who's renting is exempt for starting.
Well, absolutely, yeah. The landlord is liable for it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how many properties he has; he's liable for £100 on every one of them.
Right.
So
Look, as far as I'm concerned, it's the biggest yawn going. If you don't want a household tax, very simple, tax marijuana. To stop whinging about it. It's $100. Pay the bloody thing. Get on with it. It's a tax. That's all it is. You pay your TV license. Do you watch RTE? Get on with it.
I think
it's the biggest
people aren't worried.
going.
I think people aren't worried about paying £100. I think what's bothering people is it's only the opener for what you will be paying at a later date, and this is what worries people. Not they can bear with the £100, but they don't know what they'll be paying a couple of years down the road, and this is what the real worry comes in for most people.
Well, I think, for me, the big problem with it is this is nothing to do with household charges. The money that comes from this, of course, will go back in to but it's going to pay off unsecured bank holders that we have never promised anything to, and that's what this money is for. So let's not pretend it's to go into it's going into for local services, but the money they're getting now is being stopped.
Yeah,
to pay that. So that's what this is. This money is going to be collected on the pretense that it's going in.
I don't think
anyone
anyone ever made
any.
But Enda, 3 years in, we know that. What is the alternative? Don't do the Dame Street stuff. What is the alternative now? Are you saying we don't pay
No, what
it?
I'm saying is stop telling lies and pretending this is only €100 for your local, for the local council. It's not. It's money that's being collected and garnered, and yet again we're being told that this is, the Troika, we've told the Troika said we'd do this. We should be doing this anyway as far as I'm concerned.
Well, exactly.
But be honest about it and stop telling lies and stop pretending that this is something to do with the fact that, we're collecting this money so as we can put in proper water systems, which we need. We're not doing that. We're collecting it so as we can give it to unsecured bondholders, and I personally have a problem with that.
Because we owe money, I suppose. We owe
we don't owe them that money. They're getting that money anyway. They're unsecured. We don't have to pay them that. We're just decided that Europe said we need to pay it, so we're paying it. But we don't have to pay them that. It's unsecured.
But Enda, what's the difference then between this government and the previous government?
Absolutely none.
Sorry, there is a big difference. I think that when this government were in opposition, they were talking about press releases by the previous government.
Well, they were telling you.
And I think they've outpaced them.
I think so.
With all the leaks that they've had since they've come into office.
But there's no difference insofar as they're holding tight and holding secure to what Fianna Fáil said. They come in and they're doing the exact same thing. So I see no difference. I see no glory in what Fianna Fáil did, and I will never, ever, ever let them forget what they have done to this country.
Well, let's go back to 1915. Was it a mistake? Should we have not just bought stamps in the GPO that day? I mean, can Ireland govern itself? That's the reality, Enda. There's no point in whinging about one line item in a budget of 100, whatever it is, 50 billion.
Sorry,
there's
Michael.
one line item.
Sorry, Michael, I want to take issue with you there.
But people are using this. You have to start somewhere, and you can't let everything go and sit back and say nothing.
Well, what are you going to do from the bottom up? I mean, that's the reality. You have a system that only works about 70%. That's all. So if you're in the 30%, that is a problem.
Yeah, we've huge
If you're
problems.
in the 70%, it's not a problem. You pay your taxes. You don't go to jail. You don't get a cell beside Joe Higgins in the prison ward. That's the reality. We have two Irelands now, as we will discuss when we come to the talking about the judiciary. We're not in the one country anymore. Let's get real about it.
And we were promised that by going into Europe that we would be. That would be a great leveller, and in some cases it has been. But the whole reason I would like to be in Europe is because I liked the lifestyle they had in France and Germany, and they were well-run countries. But we didn't get that. We didn't get that. We're getting
they were paying tax. They were paying tax at
that's
an
where our problems
acceptable
came
rate.
in. Yeah, that's where
and Irish people never did pay proper tax.
But Catherine, you have to remember, Irish people didn't like paying tax because when they were paying tax, it was abused.
Yeah,
the money that was being taken in was abused.
Enda, we have one of the highest levels of functional illiteracy in this country, and one of the highest levels of teachers' salaries. They don't make sense. You can go across the board and pick examples of that everywhere you go. And that is one of the problems. We have to start looking at ourselves realistically. And we pay far too much for far too little. And that's really emerged over the last 3 years. As Warren Buffett says, when the tide goes out, you get to see who's been swimming naked, and Ireland has been a nudist beach.
And that goes across the board to all the professions.
Everyone, everywhere you look. Everywhere you look.
Do you not think it's significant that the countries that this has happened in is countries like Ireland and Italy and Greece?
I'm not going to use the magic word.
No. Because when they brought in the euro, which now, whether anyone likes it or not, has been a disaster for this country. Things where the euro was levelled against the mark, which obviously was done to benefit Germany.
Yeah.
So,
But for years, Enda, we were going around telling everybody about how our public service was the equal of Germany. We had a politician
we're
sit
equal
here
in
and tell us we
terms
had
of,
the best education system in the world.
well, we like to believe,
Yeah,
that.
We, you know, so
Well,
now.
wait, now we did have at one time, I know it has changed greatly,
When,
but
Dermot?
yeah, all right, go back 20 years when we were of great attraction,
Road
not
turn.
just to Europe, but to America. And you have to
Madras.
admit
And
and see
still
that.
are. Still
So
are.
it's easy when we're down to start scuttling us and saying we're absolutely useless. You mentioned you would like to be, you know, you would like some of what France had. Remember, France hasn't balanced their budgets in over 40 years. And these are the countries we're looking up to, Germany and France. Now, since the euro
Yeah,
came
but they
in,
do have a good
Since-
health service and that.
They have.
So, and
They have,
we
but
haven't
do you-
balanced our budget, and we haven't had
but
that.
do you know
so.
something? The amount of patients per nurses in France is less than 50% of what we have. So we ought to have a look at what they're doing, because for 20 odd years, this health situation in Ireland is absolutely diabolical,
Yeah, but-
and there's nobody making any improvement on it.
One of the problems, Dermot, is our economy is too small. In the modern world, our economy is far too small. There are 20 cities in China that have a bigger population than Ireland. We do not have an internal market. We are obliged to deal with an external market, and every so often, you know, we are going to be wards of court, and that's what we are at the moment. We don't have choice. You know, and I'm not going to go around attributing blame as to why that is, but that is a reality.
Oh, we always have choices, Mick.
Yeah,
we always
that-
have. We
yeah, but
have
the main
lots
one
of
is that-
choices.
yes.
And when our health service was in bits, we chose to put money into livestock. We chose to put money into horses rather than people. So they're the choices, and they're the choices that we made, and they're the reasons why our society is the way it is.
But they're
Because
choices
the
that
choices
governments
we
made, they're not
Yes.
choices
yeah.
that ordinary people
But
made.
Catherine, people voted for them again and
I
again,
know,
and Charlie
I know.
McCreevy is that in his very first budget. That's what he did, and people came out and voted for him
Yeah,
again.
but the
I
Late
know.
Late Show is the longest running television program in the world. It's not because it's the best,
Oh, by
but
no
it
means.
but it is the longest, and that's perhaps indicative of Ireland is that nobody really has the wherewithal to say, hold on, this is actually rubbish. You know, they'll all say, did you watch the toy show? I mean, what is the toy show? I don't know, but that's what I'm saying. Look, there's a lot. I take Dermot's on board. There's a lot of good things here, but there's we spend an awful lot of money on rubbish, and then spend an awful lot of our time talking up the rubbish. Gay Byrne wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes in a competitive market.
Well,
Ryan
he tried
Tubridy,
America
3
and
minutes.
didn't.
Pat Kenny, about 30 seconds. But you know, this is a country where Jerry Ryan had a serious problem for a very long time, and the people who knew about it stayed stum. That's Ireland. When we get down to talking about the judiciary, you present evidence, we ignore it. We have a serious cultural problem that hopefully by 2016 we might get to address.
Well, before we move on
I
to
think we'd
the
be lucky
justice
to
system
It's
now,
very optimistic. Very optimistic.
I would love to.
do you think there's the Irish Times has told us now on the 5th of January that over 16,000 have either registered or have paid for it already. Now, there's a deadline of the 31st, just for anybody who's listening and is worried about this. There's a deadline on the 31st of the 3rd. Anyone who is on mortgage interest supplement is exempt. So you don't, or if you're living on a ghost estate, you're also exempt. And you can pay it in 4 instalments of €25 if you want. You can do it over the internet on householdcharge.ie, www.householdcharge.ie. But obviously there is a big, there are politicians trying to rally this. Richard Boyd Barrett, Mick Murphy, Paul Murphy, and the TD Joan Collins are all trying to rally support to not pay it. What do you think the Irish people will do? Do you think, I don't know how many 6,000 is out of the number of households we have in Ireland.
Well, being typical Irish, I think what we'll all do is we'll grumble and grouse for a day, but we'll pay it. The majority of people will pay it. Now, there will be a selected few that will decide, right, I'm not paying this, and make an issue of it. But basically, it is an immoral charge. No matter how you look at it, it's immoral, but we recognise that the banks...
Many would say it's a
Michael,
progressive tax.
Michael,
Well,
sorry,
I guess
just
to
one
say
moment.
it's immoral because they're not collecting it to put
yeah.
into what they're saying they're putting it into.
It's
Collecting
yeah,
it to give it to people
it's
who
wrong.
are very rich and who have no...
Yeah, it's wrong in several ways, but that's not the point. The point I'm making is that we've to pay it because each of us recognise the fact that the state is in a state of crisis and we need to get our finger in and sort it out. So we all have to put our shoulder to the wheel and make an effort. We all recognise that. But it's how fair these things are done that make them acceptable or unacceptable to the public at large. Germany, when the euro came in, Germany basically has underwrote most of the deficits across Europe since the foundation of the euro. And I think we in Europe have to recognise that. It wasn't France, it was Germany. And we must recognise that.
Catherine, I'm just wondering, what do you think? Do you think the Irish people will pay
Oh,
it?
I think most people will pay it. I think most people will pay it. As Dermot says, possibly with initial grumbling. And I know that people are worried about what will happen in the future, whether charges will go up and that sort of thing. My only problem with it is, to be honest with you, I don't have a problem with the household tax. I know what Enda is saying, but it never came across to me that they were going to use it in my locality, that I was going to pay 100 quid and they were going to start having dustmen who were cheerful and wave at me in the morning. I mean, that just doesn't happen.
Maybe with 2012 that'll be one of the changes.
It would be nice to think. But
Christmas card works.
25 quid at Christmas works even better.
On a present.
Lovely.
Oh, they're very nice. They are very nice.
Yeah.
No, I haven't got to think that's been wonderful people. But I do think that people are worried about what's going to happen in the future, and we would have to assume that the charges will increase. And I think that's okay as well, provided there's a fairness in the system. In that, in other words, if I live in an 8-bedroomed house in Ballsbridge or Aylesbury Road or somewhere, that I'm not paying the same as somebody in a 3-bedroom semi-detached house in Darndale. I mean, it's not the same. We're talking about square meters and local amenities and all of those things should be taken into account. Also, another thing that should be taken into account is the number of incomes going into the house. That will also have to be, I think, important. I mean, if you've got somebody with 3 incomes coming in, 3 earners coming in, in one household, what happens there? Does it increase slightly? I think it should.
So are you suggesting that it should be means tested?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, before we finish up on this, Richard, I would be interested in what do you think?
Nothing really.
Will you be paying this tax yourself, or do you rent, or do you
Well,
are you
actually,
a household
just
owner?
I have to admit, just a piece of information you've given today, I'm sure it's probably very valuable to people who heard it, was that I wasn't aware of the exemptions, and I'm actually exempt because I'm receiving mortgage interest, supplementary payment. So that is like, thank God. Like,
So you've had good news
yes,
this morning.
so today was
Well worth
definitely
coming on.
definitely worth coming in to hear
Saved
that.
you €100.
I suppose fundamentally as a tax, okay, I wouldn't say it's immoral. How it's being used is immoral, because if it was used to fund local government, which in essence, if you look at what it is as a household charge, I think it could be good. Again, but it's not going to happen. But if it was going to be expanded, that actually local government was taking its funding from this household charge, or a portion of this household charge, then you get into elements where square footage of house, kind of come into play. The only thing then, the problem with that then is that if you take this Aylesbury scenario, that you've got 5-bedroom house, whatever, at 1,500, 2,000 square foot, and they're contributing a lot of money. Well, that means then that Aylesbury is going to have very good local services, and your average, let's say, local authority house will not be contributing as much. Therefore,
That's the case at the moment anyway, Richard, isn't it?
well, I know that,
It is the
yeah,
case,
but
yeah.
So you want to change?
but so obviously then, in a Nirvana situation, then there'll be some sort of crossover. But as a tax, you see, as a tax, the reason why it's immoral is because we know that it's actually not for any great purpose. We know that it's basically to fund the exchequer for repayment of debt. It's not going to make the slightest difference to any of the services that we receive. So I do think, like everyone said, that basically had I been in a position that I would have had to pay it, yes, I would have been disgruntled and I would argue about it for the next 12 months. But I would have paid, and I think that's generally what people will do.
Okay.
So you won't be going around looking for pensioners to pay it on their behalf?
Pardon?
You won't be going around looking for pensioners to pay it on their behalf to deal with the moral issue that Dermot talks about?
Well, in total honesty, on a personal note, no.
That's all right. That's okay. I would have been surprised if you said yes, but that's what I'm saying.
No, but I'd be honest, I'd be first say that if I had the position to do that,
Yeah.
I definitely would.
I'd just like to say something about what Catherine was saying. You know, in the exemptions, are people who are bankrupt exempt? Because then Aylesbury Road will probably be
Actually, no.
Separate
Your
issue,
financial
that one.
situation doesn't come into it. I'd like to give the last word to our listener, Anne. She says, I think the figures speak for themselves. People are paying. It's not an issue. Joe Higgins, Orchard Boyd Barrett can protest populace, something nasty. But that woman, Enda, is right. There you go. It's great, isn't it? We all know where it's really going. So, agreement there, I think, probably on the panel, that the money, it's going into the big black hole, which is our debt.
And that's why Enda's the Taoiseach.
Yeah. Now, while we're on money, though, I mean, if we don't pay, if it doesn't come from a tax like this, where does it come from? And maybe we could move on to the Croke Park deal there before the break. We can open up that one. The Owen Harris wrote an article in the Irish Times starting on the Croke Park deal, saying that it was choking social solidarity. This is the deal that was made, I think, just before the Fianna Fáil went out of government, with the public service, promising them increments of 30 million in their salaries. So this is causing a little bit of argy-bargy now that salaries are dropping. Who would like to start with this one?
Is it implemented?
Oh, what a disaster.
You'd hang off every word of Owen
What a
Harris, wouldn't you? You know, I mean, why is Owen not the president, I wonder? I mean, or even the Taoiseach. He could be our Mario Monti. Yeah.
It is nice, I suppose, to be a journalist and to be able to say these words and nobody will put me.
What is the Croke
Well, I
Park
have to say,
agreement?
like, I would agree with Owen Harris on one level. I think it is causing, it's causing social division. And it's actually what Catherine said there was very interesting with regard to the amount of people living in a house and income. I think that people, we have to bring in a proper tax system that taxes people who are earning over a certain amount, and whether they're pensioners or anything else, doesn't matter. If you're earning over 50 grand, you should be taxed appropriately, and it goes up the more you're earning, and it go up in increments. And I think if we had a proper tax system, we wouldn't need Croke Park agreements. It's a disgrace and it's idiotic. And what I would really like to see change in it is they need to bring in something whereby if people aren't doing their jobs, they're sacked. Whoever made that mess over the weekend with regard to pensioners having to pay, obviously your tax is due, you have to pay it, but whoever went about proposing it in the way they did should be sacked.
Yeah, but has it not already been highlighted by two of the members here today that one thing we don't do in Ireland is take responsibility
but we
and fall
need to
on
do
our swords.
that. Like
we
the
don't
likes
do
of
it.
the Croke Park agreement, they need to do that. You need to bring in a thing whereby when people aren't doing their jobs, when you go in and you see people sitting down and do nothing, and you're talking about your bin men being nice and cheery. It'd be really nice if that could rub off on a couple of civil servants, because they treat people like you're something they walked on before they went into work. Something they need to wipe off their
I have
shoe.
to say that hasn't been my experience.
Some of them are nice, but by and large
yeah.
I've found quite a lot of them. And if you say even the nice ones won't admit that there are people working with them who actually shouldn't be there.